Well, hello xenographers everywhere and welcome to another episode. Today we're going to take a look at some of the smallest, most beautiful film SLR cameras ever made, the Olympus OM Series. Perhaps you're thinking of buying your first film camera, or maybe you've used film before and you'd like to try one of these little mechanical jewels. Whatever the case, there's an OM camera that's right for you. The OM series was made in two tiers, the so-called single-digit cameras, that's the OM1, OM2, OM3 and OM4, which were aimed at the professional market, and the so-called double-digit cameras, the OM10, OM20, OM30 and OM40, which were high-end consumer-level cameras. Today we're going to look at two single-digit cameras, the OM1 and OM2, and two double-digit cameras, the OM10 and the OM30. The OM1 was the first of the OM series. It's an all-manual camera with no electronics other than the built-in light meter, and it's a simple, pure, stripped-down photography experience. This really is a beautiful little machine. It's extremely well made and finished. It's made almost entirely of metal, and somehow it just feels right in the hand. The OM series cameras are very small and compact, and if we compare this OM1 to an early Leica 2, one of the smallest 35mm cameras I know of, you can see it's only slightly larger. The controls on this camera are a little unusual, and because of that I've sometimes heard it referred to as the Saab of SLRs. The aperture rings at the front of the lens, which is conventional enough, but the shutter speed selector is right behind the lens mount in a concentric circle, and I must admit it took me a little while to get used to. Once you are used to it though, it soon becomes second nature, and it does fall very easily to hand. The top deck's a little unusual too. The film wind levers on the right, and where you might usually find the shutter speed control is the film speed selector. Push the small button next to it and turn the dial to select the film speed. In the centre is the space for the detachable hot shoe, although I don't actually have one for this camera, and next to that is the power switch for the light meter. The film rewind cranks in the conventional position on the far left. Lift the crank to open the back, where we find a Leica style cloth shutter. Speeds on this model run from 1 second to 1,000th of a second plus B. This is a lovely little camera, and you can find a good one with a 1.8 or even a 1.4 50mm lens for between £100 and £150. It's not the cheapest SLR out there, but in my opinion it's great value for what it is. All these OM camera bodies can mount the wonderful OM Zuiko lenses, which in my opinion are some of the finest lenses ever fitted to an SLR camera. There's a massive range available, some conventional and some specialist ones like shift and macro lenses. The OM lens family is complete and comprehensive, and they all mount on every OM body. For the most part they're pretty contrasty lenses, although the later black nose multi-coated versions are a bit more contrasty than the earlier silver-nosed versions. They're all pretty sharp, and some are very sharp, although shooting at maximum aperture with an f1.4 or an f1.2 lens, you'll most likely see a bit of softness at the corners. Just like the cameras, the lenses are very nicely made and engineered, and again, like the cameras, they're often smaller than equivalent lenses from other manufacturers. And as you can see from these shots, they can make some really nice images. The OM2 is similar to the OM1, but at the same time it's very different. It's essentially an OM1 with the addition of aperture priority auto exposure. It has pretty much the same body, the same shutter and shutter speeds, and the same jewel-like feeling. But despite these similarities, it feels kind of different. This is a camera that's more than the sum of its parts, and its aperture priority auto exposure turns it into a rather different animal. It makes the camera that bit quicker to use, and there's a little less to think about. And if you're not keen on auto exposure, you can shoot in full manual too. The top deck's very similar to the OM1. The film counter's on the right next to the wind lever, and the film speed selector is combined with the exposure compensation control. In the centre is the removable hot shoe. These can often crack because of over tightening, so use some care here. And on the left is the switch for auto and manual use. Next to that is the film rewind crank, which lifts to open the back. Just like the OM1, there's a Leica style cloth shutter, common to all the cameras in the OM range. In use, these cameras are delightful. They just feel right in the hand. They're small, compact, beautiful and beautifully made. As for prices, well, the OM2 is pretty much the same as the OM1, around 120 to 150 for a good one with an f1.8 50mm lens, or possibly an f1.4 if you're lucky. Not the cheapest SLR, but great value for what it is. So now we come to the double-digit OMs. These were the less expensive option of the OM line. They miss out on a couple of features like mirror lockup and interchangeable focusing screens. Despite that though, these are very nice little cameras indeed, and just like the single-digit cameras, they'll mount all the OM Zuiko lenses. The OM10 is an aperture priority auto exposure camera, so it's nice and easy to shoot. Just select the aperture you want, focus, and the camera does the rest. You can shoot this camera in full manual mode, but you need the manual adapter. It fits onto the front of the camera, and shutter speeds from 1 to 1,000th of a second plus B are controlled by turning the dial. If we look at the top plate, we can see the film counter on the right next to the film advance lever. Next to that is the combined film speed selector and exposure compensation control, as well as the auto and manual mode selector. In the centre is a fixed hot shoe, and to the left of that is the on-off switch with battery check and self-timer positions too. And as with most SLRs, the film rewind crank also serves as the back release control. Pull up to open as usual. And inside we find, again, a cloth shutter. This is a very nice little camera. It's a consumer model, but it's a good quality one that stood the test of time. There's a great many of these left in good working order. If you can, buy one with the manual adapter included. It makes the camera much more versatile, and they're about 15 or 20 quid to buy separately. One of these in good condition with a manual adapter and f1.8 lens will cost between 40 to 60 pounds, and I think that's great value for money. The OM30 is broadly similar to the OM10 in that it was aimed at the same market sector. There are two important differences though. First, it does away with the manual adapter. Aperture priority and manual modes are selected on the camera in the usual way, which does make the camera feel more complete. And secondly, this camera has an autofocus system. It only works with one lens though. That's the 35 to 70mm that was originally supplied with the camera. However, even if you don't have that lens, which I don't, and you're manually focusing in the usual way, the camera's focusing system still operates, and it tells you when you're in focus by means of a focus assist light in the viewfinder. Looking at the top plate, we can see that it's broadly similar to the OM10 with a few styling differences that make it look a bit more modern. The exposure counter's on the right, next to the rather angular wind lever. Next to that is a very angular shutter button, which I think looks very modern and rather groovy. On the left is the mode selector, much like the OM10, and the rewind crank, which also, when it's raised, opens the back. And inside we see that same cloth shutter. The shutter speed selector is essentially the same as that on the single digit models in that it's positioned around the lens mount, although it's made from black plastic rather than silver metal. I must say it's not particularly easy to see which speed you've selected, although that's easily seen on the LED display in the viewfinder. I've not had this camera long, but I do rather like it. It's a consumer level camera, but it's nicely made and very well engineered. As for price, a body will cost between £20 to £30, and with an f1.8 50mm lens, they go for around £50 to £60. So, 4 really nice little cameras, all part of the same family, each with their own quirks and each with their own strengths. They're very nice to use and they all make some great images. If you're looking for a first film camera, any of these would be a good introduction and a great way to learn. Or if you're experienced in film but want to try something a bit different, the OM cameras are very hard not to like. So that's it from me for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the bell before you go. And if you enjoy the content on this channel, please consider supporting me on patreon.com/Zonography so I can keep bringing you more. As ever, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time for some more Zonography.